Y'all, one sec. My computer's just being wonderful. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna start with the stuff from last time. And then our review's pretty short today, that you should have time to go back and finish that assignment if you had questions or if you need resets. It probably seems like, wow, we're testing again, we just barely tested. You're right, but in order for us to have time for test corrections, we can't wait and test like the last week of the quarter, you know what I mean? So your test only covers two things. Covers what we did last time, compositions and function operations, and then it covers inverses. That's it. Okay, it's not going to go back and have piecewise and all the other stuff on it. So go ahead and take a look at your first page. Okay, you'll notice that you have functions for f, g, and h across the top. Okay, we're going to run probably just through a couple of examples. Make sure you remember how to do this, but you should have learned how to do this on Thursday when you had your sub. Okay, so let's start with number 1. I have f plus g parentheses 5. Remember that that's telling you to take the 5, plug it into both equations. So f of 5 plus g of 5. And then once you get these two numbers, do you remember you just add them? Okay. Now that's why I had you pick up a calculator. Okay, so first let's start with f of 5. F of 5 means that you're going to take the number 5 and put it right here. So instead of 4 times x minus 10, now it's 4 times 5 minus 10. What's 4 times 5? 20. And what's 20 minus 10? So my first number is 10 plus. Then when I want g of 5, where am I going to plug the number 5 into? Which equation? First, second, third. Second, because that's the one labeled with the g, right? So instead of x plus 2, it's 5 plus 2. And 5 plus 2 is 7. 10 plus 7 is 17. Okay? Now, if the operation in the middle was minus, like on number 2, you'd find the two numbers and then subtract them, right? We're good with that? Okay, what's the operation here? Multiplication. What about down here? Division. Let's do a division. So let's start with number 4. So I'm going to take my -2, apply it to both functions. Notice that I'm keeping them in the order that they started off with. So if it's g over f, I'm going to keep g on top, f on bottom. Let's plug in -2. Ready? So I have 4. Oh, wait, we're doing g first. So that'd be here. I'll have -2 plus 2. What's -2 plus 2 here? That'd be 0. 0 on top, divide by. And then for f of -2, I'm plugging in -2 to the 4x minus 10. So it'd be 4 times -2 minus 10. You have a calculator if you need it, but what's 4 times -2? -8 minus 10 more. 18, very good. Okay. Now I want you to look at number 5. What's the only difference between number 4 and number 5? They're switched in order. So see how this one's g over f, this one's f over g. So my answer is going to come out almost the same, but it's going to be 18 over 0. Okay, so then the question is, which one of those is allowed and which one's undefined? This is the undefined one. You can divide 0 cookies by all of your 18 friends and everybody gets 0. That's allowed. What you're not allowed to do is divide by 0 on the bottom. So this one would be undefined. Okay, And then if you hopefully were here that day and you watched the notes, remember that we said it's okay to get 0 on the top. But no, you can't get 0 on the bottom, okay? But you do need to know the difference. Also, you have a calculator, hopefully. Do 0 divided by 18. It'll give you 0. Do 18 divided by 0. It'll tell you error. So that's another way for your test. If you can't remember which one's which, type it in and see. If it gives you an error, that's undefined. Okay? All right, for the last 5 examples, what are you plugging in? Is it a number or a letter? Okay, it's a letter. And if it's a letter, that means that your answer should just be in a new equation. Okay, so let's start, please, with number 8. You want f dot g of x. That's a multiplication dot. So we're going to do f of x times g of x. Okay, and that's a multiplication in the middle. So what that means is, if this is still an x, that I'm going to use the equations, not plug in a specific number. And that was also in your notes last time. So what is the equation for f of x? Go back and read it to me, please. 4x minus 10. And then what was the equation for g of x? X plus 2. And then remember that if you're multiplying or if you're subtracting, you should be using parentheses. So I'm going to group here and group here. Okay. So that would be double distributing. Let's see what we get. Okay, or if you like FOIL better, first, outside, inside, last, that's fine too. So what is 4x times another x? 4x squared. Okay, what about 4x times plus 2? 4x times 2 is 8x. Okay, negative 10 times x is negative 10x. And then negative 10 times 2 is negative 20. Okay. Then from there, go ahead and combine those like terms in the middle. If I have an 8x and a minus 10x, what is 8 minus 10? Negative 2x. Very good. So your final answer would be 4x squared minus 2x minus 20. Okay. And then for your test, when you take it, it's going to say it has to be in standard form. So remember, that just means you put your terms in order. So the x squared comes first, 2x, then the 20. Okay. All right, go ahead and write out number 7 for me. I'm not going to necessarily do it, but I want you to just start it. Okay, number 7, please. Okay, so far is this right? F of x minus g of x. Okay, and then f of x is 4x minus 10. And g of x is x plus 2. Right or wrong? Okay, this is f. And this is g. And I put subtraction in the middle. Right or wrong? Wrong. What's wrong with it? What am I minusing? The entire x plus 2. Is that what I wrote? I'm only minusing the x, and the 2 is still being added. So if it's subtraction, you have to group. Okay? So just to make sure you don't make that mistake. Addition, you don't care. Add the like terms, whatever. Okay, but if it's subtraction, you got to subtract the x and the 2. So make sure for subtraction that you use parentheses. Okay? And then from there, can you do it? So it'd be, you want to do it? Or you got it? So it'd be 4x minus 10. And then a minus on the x, and then a minus on the 2. Okay? Addition, that step is not necessary, but for multiplication and for subtraction, it is. Okay, how many x's? We may as well just finish it. How many x's will I have in my final answer? 4x, take away an x is 3x. And then negative 10 and negative 2 make negative 12. Very good. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. Numbers 9 and 10 have a little open circle. Does anybody remember the name of that? It starts with a C. Good. That is a composition. And this was the very end of the notes on Thursday. So for a composition, you're plugging the function closer to x into the function farther away. So for example, I'd be using the G formula and plugging into F. Now the example that we're going to work together is actually going to be number 10, but you'll work both of these out very similarly. So for number 10, what am I plugging the G formula into? H. So can you read me the H formula? Look up at the top. X squared minus 10x minus 8. How many x's are there? There's an x squared and a 10x. So in both of those spots, I'm going to leave a little blank, just like we did in the notes. So my H formula is x squared minus 10x minus 8. Well, then it's going to be blank squared minus 10 blank minus 8. Just like that. And then you're going to take the G formula and sub it into that blank. So what is my G formula that I'm going to put in those x spots? X plus 2. Okay. And then remember what I said, for multiplication and for subtraction, you must put parentheses. So that means right here, I'm putting a set of parentheses and right here. Okay, if you did your practice on Thursday, how did we do the x plus 2 squared? Do you remember? Just put it twice and then FOIL it out. Okay, so the x plus 2 squared, it's just going to be x plus 2 twice. So it'll be x plus 2 times x plus 2 minus 10x plus 2 minus 8. And it's, you can do it in your head maybe, but I would say, especially on a test, just work it out so you don't make silly mistakes. Okay, go ahead and times this out. Times this out, and then combine your like terms. I'll give you a second to do that. You're going to times these two, times these two, and then combine your like terms. My battery has this phone. My desk. All right, let's see what you got. So x and x make x squared. Then you should have a 2x from the outside and a 2x from the inside. And then your L in the FOIL would be 2 times 2, which is a 4. Second term, you're timesing in this 10. So minus 10x. And then what sign on the 20? Minus 20. Because remember, this is a negative 10 times 2. And then minus 8. Okay, then you have a calculator, put together your like terms. So your x squared is alone. I have a 2x, a 2x, and a negative 10x. How many altogether? So that'd be 4 minus 6 minus 10 is minus 6x. And then for my number by itself, 4, negative 20, negative 8 would be negative 24. Okay. Questions on that? All right, go ahead and go to the next page. We've covered the majority of what we did last class, so we're just gonna work a couple more examples and then I'm gonna give you some time to work. Let's take a look at number, let's do 12. Okay, the first two you're plugging in numbers. Let's do letter B because we haven't done one of these yet off the front. So it's F composition G of negative 3. That means F of G of negative 3. Where do I plug the negative 3 into first? Formula F or formula G? The letter that's closer is the G. So will you take a second, use your calculator if you want to. Okay, you're gonna take your G formula, which is right here, and you're gonna plug a negative 3 into that. So it'd be negative 3 squared, and then minus 1. Negative 3 squared, minus 1. Aiden, can I do that better?
Yeah.
Okay, y'all tell me if this is right or wrong. Negative 3 squared minus 1. Is that right? No, if you're gonna put it in the calculator, what is negative 3 squared? What does that mean? Negative 3 times what? Another negative 3. And what's a negative 3 times another negative 3? Positive 9. Take away 1, the answer should be 8. How can I fix this? Negative 3 squared minus 1. Do you see the difference? This is wrong. So don't do that on the test. If the calculator is going to mess you up, you have to use parentheses if the base of the exponent is negative. So it should be an 8. And then I'm going to take that 8 and plug it into what? The F formula is next in line. Okay, and then my F formula is an x plus 6. So then that'd be 8 plus 6, which gives me what? 14 for your final answer. Okay. Questions on that? All right. We're gonna eliminate letter B here. Let's do one more. Let's do number 11, part B. Okay. Number 11, part B. Okay, so I want F composition G of X. That means I want F of G of X. So I'm going to take the equation for G, plug it into the equation for F. What is the original equation for F? X squared minus 3. Then I'm going to change it to blank squared minus 3. And then in that blank where the X would have gone, I'm going to plug my G formula. What is my G formula? 5x. Is that right or wrong? Wrong. Got to put what? Parentheses. Very good. And remember, the reason that matters is I'm not just squaring the X. I'm squaring the 5 and the X, right? So what's 5 times 5 for the 5 squared? And then X times X would be X squared minus 3. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. Last thing I'm going to help you with, number 14. Do y'all know how to open the fancy fraction in the calculator? For number 14, it's alpha length. Okay, so I'll just show you that real quick. If you want to open the fancy fraction, alpha, and then length. Because on that one, you're plugging in 1/2. And if you need help with that, I'm going to walk around and try to help y'all with whatever. Okay. All right, so let's try to get that first page finished front and back. Okay, then we'll come through and work on the second page in a little bit. If you need to go back and look at that old homework, okay, or ask for resets, I'll extend the deadline to today. Okay. All right, you can do it. Work together, ask me for help if you need it. And then test corrections are after school today if you wanna plan to come by, or Wednesday or Thursday. Yes, so you'll get half your points back. So let's say you got an 80, how many points do you get on? 20, right? Then you can get back 10. So basically, or if you got some, say, like I said, it's 30 points, you get this 20 back. After school today, Wednesday, and then if you can't do those times. I'm fine with that. The only day I won't be here first. From last time? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so no stress at all. If you're not done, you're gonna have all the time after lunch. But since some of us are ready to go on to that next page, let's go ahead and take a look at your second page, please. Okay. So remember, the big thing about inverses, okay, is that you're switching the X and the Y. So for example, let's say I'm doing number 16. Okay, it says that for F, I have -2, 3. I have -3, 4. And then my last one is -4, 5. Okay, that's for F of X. Then how would I find the table for F to the -1? What would I do with those original ordered pairs? Okay, you would swap the order. Okay, remember F to the -1, that means inverse. Okay, so for the inverse, instead of -2, 3, it'd be 3, -2, 4, -3, and 5, -4. Okay, so now I have a chart for F, I have a chart for F inverse. What is it asking me to list? The domain or the range? Right. And the range for which function? F or F inverse? F inverse. That means I'm looking at this chart. Do I want the X's or the Y's for a range? The Y's. So your range for the inverse would be -2, -3, and -4. Now, quick question. Those are the Y's for the inverse, but what were they for the original? They were the original X's. So your domain and range just switch, right? Because if all you're doing is changing the order, then the range for the inverse is going to be your original X's, because when you had flipped them, they became the Y's. Does that make sense? So that should help you to do number 15. Okay, now let's go on to some algebraic inverses. Okay, let's start with letter B. Okay, remember, to find an algebraic inverse, you switch the X and the Y in the equation. Remember that F of X equals, that's really just Y equals in disguise. So when I switch the letters, it's going to be 1/2. My X -3 is now a Y -3. And then instead of a Y equals at the front, I'm going to swap that for an equals X at the back. Okay. What will I do first? Okay, so try, and actually maybe I want to do the one next to it instead. I mean, we could do either one, but this one's actually a little bit harder, so let's do this one instead. So it'll be 4 5th root. X plus 3 is now a Y plus 3, and then equals X. Okay, so you can go back and do that first one. Okay, what would I get rid of first in this example? I do need to get rid of the root, but I can't get rid of the root first. What do I have to do even before that? That 4's gotta go. So I'm gonna do a 1/4 and a 1/4. My 1/4 and my 4 cross out. I have a 5th root, y plus 3. And then there are two ways that you can write this. You can write a 4th x, or you could put x over 4. I'm going to write it like this because I feel like that's how we wrote it when we did the notes on it, but the other way is not wrong. If you put your x over 4, that's the same thing. Okay, from here, how do I get rid of a 5th root? Do you remember? No. So a square root, I use a square power. Cubic root, I use a cube power. How do I get rid of a 5th root? 5th power. So I'm going to put my 5 up top as a power. Group 5 up top as a power. Remember that grouping has to be there. You can't skip it or it's wrong. Okay, then from there I have y plus 3 equals 1/4x in parentheses to the 5th. And then what would my last step be with that plus 3? Minus the 3 across. Okay, so your final answer would be this right here. So it'd be y equals 1/4 x to the 5th minus 3. And then I can't remember if I talked to y'all about it, but remember the pattern that like a plus 3 on the inside becomes a minus 3 on the outside. Did we talk about that? Yeah. Okay, you just kind of look at the pattern, or like this one had a times 4 on the outside. Now it's a divide by 4 on the inside. So you should be able to see most of the original components are still in the equation even after you do the stuff. Okay. All right, next row, we're gonna do the first one here. Okay, so it says square root x plus 6 minus 7. So I'm going to change that to be square root y plus 6 minus 7. And then instead of a y equals, it's an x equals. What are we getting rid of first? The 7, it's a minus, so I'm going to do a plus. So now I have y plus 6, x plus 7. Okay, from here, how do I get rid of the y plus 6 under the square root? What do we do? Square. Okay, so square and square. What do I need to make sure I use on this side? Okay, parentheses. So now I have y plus 6 equals x plus 7 squared. And then what's my last step? The plus 6 is going to end up being a minus 6 to the back. So I have y equals x plus 7 squared minus 6. You're not done. Remember that for squares and square roots, you have to pick a half of the parabola. This was a little bit weird. It was at the end of the notes last week on Tuesday. Okay, here's how you pick. Was it, so our choices are for x is greater than or x is less than. We're picking a half of the parabola. Remember that it has to do with the sign in front of the square root. Was this originally a positive square root or a negative square root? Then I'm going to put 4 x is greater than, because it was a positive square root. Now, when you do this question over here, what are you going to end up picking? What kind of square root is this one? Negative. So I'm going to go ahead and put blank 4x is less than. Okay, but how do I know that it's a greater than? Because this was a positive square root at the beginning. Okay, versus if it was a negative square root at the beginning, that's what makes it come out to be a less than. Okay, and then the number that you put here is going to be whatever's the opposite of with your x. So for example, if it was an x with a plus 7, what's the number going to come out to be? Negative 7. Okay, and for those questions on your test, you'll have at least one that's multiple choice to help you remember that part. Okay. So remember, a positive square root goes with a greater than, a negative square root goes with a less than. Now let's work, this will be our last question on this page. First question, look right here. Is it a greater than or less than?
Less than.
For this one, it's a less than. Then when I take the square root, am I gonna pick the plus square root or the minus square root? Okay, a less than means that I'm gonna choose the negative square root. Okay, versus on the question prior to that, it was the x greater than. What would I choose on this question? What would I choose for that one? The positive square root. Because remember, whenever you square root both sides, technically it's a plus or minus in the front, and then you're picking a branch to go with your inequality. Okay, so now let's work number 23. Rewrite your question, switch the x for a y, and then switch the y equals for an equals x at the end. So I have 1/2 y minus 3 squared plus 10 equals x. For your birthday, you brought us donuts?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, sure. Okay, solve it.
I just didn't want to interrupt your thoughts.
Thanks, happy birthday.
It's no problem. Thank you. I love your stuff.
No, thanks. All right, what are we doing first? Taking out the 10 with a subtraction 10. So I have 1/2 y minus 3 x minus 10. Next step, how do I get rid of the 1/2? That's a divide by 2 right now. Multiply by 2. So I have y minus 3 squared equals 2x minus 10. Is that right? What'd I do wrong? Gotta put parentheses. Why does that matter? Because it's not just the x getting times by 2, it's the x and the 10. So that's gonna be a 2x minus what? 20. Then from there, I gotta get rid of my squared by taking the square root. And when I square root, I'm picking a plus or a minus to go in front. Which one did we say we're picking? The minus. So it's y minus 3 equals the negative square root of 2x minus 20. And then the minus 3, zip it across as plus 3. Okay. And that would be your final answer. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, last thing I do want to say on that before we go on to the last page. For your test, you can't just write the answer and do it all in your head. You need to show some steps. I don't need to see every single step, but if you just do the inside out and switch stuff around, you're going to get points off. I'll remind you of that on that day. But all right, are we good to go on to the last page? All right. We're going to do, we'll do 18. Okay, you'll notice that 18 and 19, you just have graphs and you're asked to graph the inverse. The charts at the bottom are optional. You can use them or not, but you have to do at least 5 points, just like we did on that practice. So looking at, let's do the curve. Put dots on 5 pretty points. Okay, and I know this graph is kind of janky, but just do your best. So I see I have at least 1 at the vertex. Looks like I've got 1 here and here. And then for my other 2, I'm going to pick where it hits the y-axis. So it looks like it hits here and here. Okay, but if you pick a different 5 points, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you at least get where it curves. Okay. All right. So as it says here, you may use the tables, but they're not required. They won't be required. I'm looking at your graph as the answer. So let's start with this point right here. What is your vertex? Give me the ordered pair. 9, -4 is correct. Then what would that be backwards? -4, 9. So then I'll go negative 4, 9 is here. Okay. My next 2 points around that, it looks like it's 8, negative 3. And then that'd be 8, negative 5. So then if I were to reverse those, what would my 2 new points be? Negative 3, 8, and negative 5, 8, right? Negative 5, 8. Okay. But if you want to do it in the chart, that's totally fine. I'll put them on there for you if you need it. Then last 2 points. This is 0, negative 1, and 0, negative 7. So then when I flip those 2 points backwards, it'd be negative 1, 0, and negative 7. So that'd be here. And here. And then just kind of connects those dots. Like that. Also, do we remember where the symmetry should be on your graph? Remember, it should be symmetric about that diagonal. So if you draw in this line right here, you know what I mean? It should like cut your little heart thing in. So if that doesn't happen where it matches on both sides, then you know that you messed up. Questions on that? Okay, we have one more thing to cover, but we only have 5 minutes. So for right now, I want you to skip these 2 up here. Okay, we're gonna do them after lunch, and they're not hard, but we'll do these after lunch. And those will be bonuses on your test. So we'll do those in a little bit. So I would say keep working on everything else. You have 5 more minutes till lunch. Okay. Can we finish? And then we're all done. Go to that one that we had skipped at the top. Okay, do y'all know what the commutative, what that means? Commutative? Probably not. Okay, so commutative just means that like the order doesn't matter. So like what's 5 plus 2? Not a trick question. 5 plus 2 is 7. What about 2 plus 5? So the order didn't matter, then it's commutative. Okay, same thing with multiplication. What's 5 times 2? 10 times, the other way? 10. Okay, now what about subtraction? 5 minus 2 is, but 2 minus 5 is negative 3. So all operations are not commutative. Some are, but commutative means you can flip-flop the order and you'll get the same thing. Okay, so if you want to put maybe right here, it means that F composition G equals G composition F. And that's the little open O for composition, okay? So commutative in general means the order doesn't matter. Okay, but compositions are considered commutative if you can do it both ways and you get the same thing. So let me show you what I mean by that. Take a look at letter A. Okay, on your test, since we're like barely covering this right now, this will be the bonus, but you'll have to show your work to get credit for it. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna F composition G. And then we're gonna G composition F. And then at the end, we're gonna see if they come out to be identical. If they're identical, it's commutative, but if they come out different, they're not commutative. Okay, so let's start with F composition G. Then I'm gonna take the G equation and I'm gonna plug it in where the X is. So instead of square root X minus 1, it'd be square root blank minus 1. And then what are we putting in the blank? Good. Now the plus 1 and the minus 1 are both in the square root. So what is plus 1 minus 1? 0 cancels out. So then really this is just x squared, but then it's also square rooted. It's just x, very good. Okay. Now let's do it the other way. So now we're doing g of f. So that means we're taking our g equation and we're plugging f into that. So instead of x squared plus 1, it's blank squared plus 1. And then in the little blank, what are we going to plug in? The square root x minus 1. So now I'm taking this and plugging it in here. And then you would say, okay, well, I have a, can I cancel the ones out here? No, because this one's inside, that one's outside, but what still can cross out? Squared and square roots still cross out. So then these are gone. And then I have x minus 1 plus 1. And then the plus 1 minus 1's cross out. What's our final answer? X. Okay, so since they both came out to the same thing, you would say that those are commutative. Because it came out the same. Versus if they had come out to different things, then you would say they're not commutative. Okay, let's do the next one. Okay, the order that you do this in doesn't really matter. You can pick, I'm usually going to do FOG first and then GOF second, but like I said, it doesn't matter. So we'll do FOG first, GOF second. So for FOG, I'm going to start with the F formula, which is 3x minus 5. And I'm going to plug G into that. So instead of 3x minus 5, it's 3 blank minus 5. And then in the blank, I'm plugging in the equation for G, which is an x plus 5. Is that written correctly? No, what are we missing? Okay, good. Those parentheses have to be there because it's not just the 3 times x, it's 3 times the entire x minus 5. So then 3 times x would be 3x. What next? Plus 15 and then minus 5. 15 minus 5 means my final answer is 3x plus 10. So then I want to see on the other order if it comes out to the same thing. So now switch them. So now we're doing g of f. My g equation is x plus 5. So I'll do blank plus 5. And then in that blank, for the x plus 5, I'm going to plug in my f formula for that, which is 3x minus 5. What's going to happen? And now also, why don't I need parentheses around this here? Yeah, there's no number in the front and there's no squared, right? Those are the 2 things you would have to, or also subtraction. Okay, so from here, -5 plus 5, what happens? Cancels out. And then what's my final answer? 3x. Did it come out the same or different? Okay, different. Then your conclusion would be not. Okay? Any questions? Okay, great. So then you're finishing your review in class today. Old homework, go back and finish it. You have your test on Wednesday. You know exactly what it's over. I'll send out the answer key so that you can check your work. Test corrections after school today, Wednesday, Thursday. Open house tomorrow. You don't have to come, but I'd love to have your parents come if they want to. Okay. And y'all have about 20 minutes left. Yeah. Still minus the fix across. So now you have, now square both sides. C209. So So the minus technically comes up when you square. You're squaring the whole thing, and what happens when you square it? We just get about it, that's now, here's why we never get that, it's when I pick my final answer, it's gonna be less. Versus here, remember how it's a positive square root, so we ended up to be created. So either way, that negative is gonna cross out, but it tells you that you're doing a less than. Mia, did you have a question? Yeah. What's up? Yes. Exactly right. Less than 6, correct. You can do it whether you pass or fail, you get half the points back. So like, let's say you got an 80, it was 20, you could get 10 back in return.
You reset my last.
Sure. Is this last times or the time before?
It's both.
Okay.